going on YouTube? This is Aaron here with Day 5 Fish Tanks, bringing you another video. I'm doing something a little different today. I'm getting ready to start my first series here on my YouTube channel. It's going to be called Native Fish 101, and in this series I'm going to be talking about just the differences between keeping natives versus tropical fish, different things about different kinds of natives that you can keep, care requirements, all that kind of thing. So to kick it off today, my first video is going to be the differences between the major differences between keeping natives and keeping tropicals. So when you're thinking about keeping native fish, there's several things that you have to consider. First thing you have to consider is probably the most obvious one is the temperature. Most native fish come from temperate zone. That's what the United States is. We're not a tropical area. Temperate zone, which means a little bit colder. So the native fish that you'll catch, that you'll keep, will come from colder temperature environments and will prefer colder water temperatures. Most native fish, and say most, not all, but most native fish prefer temperatures between the low 60s to the low 70s. Now they can handle temperatures much colder than that. If you think about how cold the rivers and stuff rivers and lakes get in the wintertime, most fish can handle quite a bit colder temperatures. But if you're looking for a consistent temperature to keep your fish at, low 60s to low 70s. Now, if you're thinking about mixing natives and tropicals, temperatures in the real low 70s, 71, 72, maybe even as high as 74, are good temperatures that you can keep your tank at if you're considering mixing the two. I know some people think that native fish can't commingle with tropical fish at all, but in the lower temperature ranges for the tropicals and the higher temperatures for the natives, there is a little bit of an overlap. Fishes like danios and stuff like that, danios can do better at the lower 70s range. And so they're pretty suitable to mix with your typical natives. Most of the time with the native tank, you don't have to keep a heater in the tank unless if the tank is going to be in a really cold area, which again, natives can handle the much colder temperatures. They go into a hibernation during the winter time. I keep a heater in this tank because of where it's located at in my house. It's located in my basement. And the temperature swing is pretty drastic throughout the day, which again, the fish could handle it, but not so sure how well the plants would do. They might not appreciate the temperature swings daily like that. And so just for my own personal preference, I keep the tank set at about 71 year round. And so so that's my personal preference. But for the most part, you don't need to keep a heater in the tank. Second thing you need to consider, which you may not think about, is the current in the tank, the amount of current that you keep in the tank, water flow, also the oxygenation of the water. Now I mentioned the two together because one affects the other. The higher current and the more surface agitation you get in the water, the higher the oxygenation levels. Also the temperature affects the O2 levels as well. The lower the temperature, the more dissolved oxygen is in the water for the fish. I don't know the science behind that, I just know that's how it is. But many of the fish that you'll catch, especially if you go with the wild caught fish, they really need the high oxygen levels in the water, and so that fast current that you'll get, that you see in the streams and the rivers and stuff they come from, kind of in some way needs to be replicated in your tank. Now some fish don't necessarily require that. A lot of the shiners and the minnows or whatever minnow species do okay with that. But if you got fish like darters, which are these little guys down here, they look kind of like goby type fish. But a lot of darter species come from the riffles, the real fast-moving, shallow streams. So if you're going to keep those, the current and the O2 levels, that's something that you have to keep in mind. Now, there's some darter species like the ones I have in here, the Iowa darters, that can be found naturally in lakes and places like that. So they don't necessarily need all the current, or don't necessarily need that type of environment. But if you're thinking about keeping native minnow species, a power head would be a good thing to think about. Now I don't keep a power head in this tank because I've got an FX5 on it, and it's rated for up to 900 gallons an hour. It's probably closer to 700 or so, but that means about 10 time turnover within an hour. So I think that's plenty of current for this tank. But some of the fishes that you're going to have to keep, you're going to need that current going through the tank. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, the last thing I want to talk about today is the difference between wild caught and store-bought. Typically, you can't find native minnows in the stores unless if they're in a feeder tank. minnow feeder tank or whatever that you would find, and they're in there by accident. But in that case, you probably need to follow the same guidelines as you would with wild caught. But if you're going to catch your fish on your own, which is a huge part of the fun of keeping natives, going out and catching your own, there's different ways that you can do it. There's seine nets, there's dip nets, microfishing, which is my favorite, minnow traps, and different things like that you can do. But if you're going to go out and catch your own fish to put in your tank, you're going to need a quarantine tank. Quarantine tank is a huge thing because there's a huge risk of the fish bringing in parasites or some kind of fungal infection or different kinds of bacteria or diseases that way. Two big things that you have to look out for are anchor worms and leeches. If you get those in your tank, it's a pain in the butt to treat. So unless if you go out and and you catch all your fish in the same day, all the fish you're going to keep in your tank in the same day, I guess you could throw them in your main tank at once if they're the only fish in there. But if you've already got a display tank, you've already got a tank set up, you don't want to add fish that have come straight out of the wild in there. You just run a huge risk of infecting your entire tank, just causing a lot of problems. So a quarantine tank is even more of a must than with tropical fish that you get from the store. I know it's recommended all across the board, no matter what where you get your fish from, whatever, to do a quarantine tank. But definitely, if you're going to catch your own fish, you really want to do the quarantine tank. 4 to 6 weeks is pretty safe to keep your fish in there, just to make sure some diseases and different things like that, parasites have a longer life cycle, and so you want to make sure that the fish are completely clean before you put them in the tank. So a quarantine tank is definitely a must. Now, if you're going to buy your fish, this is probably why this part of the hobby this aspect of the hobby, the native fish, will probably never become much more than a niche, because most of the time the only places that you can find that you can buy native fish is online. Like I said, every once in a while you'll find them in a PetSmart feeder tank, maybe some fathead minnows or something like that. But for the most part, really the best source for native fish, if you're looking to buy them rather than collect them, would be online. Some places to go look, and I'll put the links in the description below, would be zimmermansfish.com, Jonah's Aquarium, Sach's Aquaculture store, and BTDarters. And I'll put, like I said, I'll put all those links in the description below, so that if you're interested, you can check it out. Also, you can get onto Aquabid. They've got a U.S. native fish section, but most of the time you're going to find that most of the fish in that section come from Jonah's Aquarium listing anyways, so you may as well just go ahead and head on over to his site, his main site, instead. And then also, there's also eBay. Every once in a while you'll find, you find rainbow shiners on eBay from time to time. You find red shiners, for the most part, the four that I mentioned before, those are probably going to be your best bet. So, anyways, I'm going to be doing more videos in this series. I'm going to do stuff like, different types of sunfish species, which are, the types of fish that a lot of people are most familiar with. Different types of minnows. Minnows for the planted tank, different types of setups that you can do for native fish, and then maybe even if I can get a good enough day, I may even take the camera out with me and I'll show you guys how I microfish to fill my tank. So anyways, thanks for watching, guys. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you later.